Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's course, we'll be talking about CSS. What is CSS? Why we need CSS? What we do with CSS in our website tutorial course. I welcome you all once again. So we are going to start. We will start with asking what is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And why do we need CSS? We need CSS to beautify our website. When we develop website with the HTML, we need CSS to create a good look for our website. We need to make our website look appealing, and we also need to make our website to be fit and compatible on all device sizes. These are what we do with CSS. Now we are going to start first. We have introduced what CSS is. We are going to start what are the syntax of CSS. Now let's start. First of all, let's go from our previous video, from our HTML video. Let's open the file that we used in creating our HTML course. I will simply go to my desktop. You remember I have the file on my desktop. I will quickly go to my desktop, choose that my first website file again, open it. These are the basic stuffs we do normally when we start coding in HTML. You open your, so now we have our file opened. Let me close this. What we are actually working on CSS today. First thing I want us to know is we have three types of CSS. And what are the two types of CSS? We have the inline CSS, we have the internal CSS, and we have the external CSS. We'll start by describing and giving examples of these different types of CSS. By that, we are going to start coding. Okay? So first of all, what you are going to do now is to create a CSS file. How do you create a CSS file? You come to this place, we have a file icon. You choose new file. You can call it anything as long as it ends with the .css. Okay, that's the rule. So I will call it style.css. I'll hit enter key. Now I have my CSS file. I've just created a CSS file. And what you are going to ask now, what is this syntax of CSS? How do you start creating CSS? What is the syntax of CSS? Remember, I've mentioned earlier that we have different types of CSS, which are the inline, internal, and external CSS. What I currently have right now is external CSS, but I will still go back and show us the other three types. So now let me just show you what the syntax of CSS is. Okay, first of all, let's go to our HTML file again. We'll simply go to our HTML file again. Let's create a new div. We'll call this is div. So now we currently have this div. Let's put a h3 tag. This is okay. I think we need to host this. I think let's create a new HTML file for our CSS course. I think that's the best thing to do. Let's create a new file for our HTML course. Okay, let's create a new HTML. Okay, let's create a new HTML file for our CSS course. Okay, let's call this CSS HTML course .html, right? So we are just going to be using this HTML for our CSS course particularly. So now we'll just create a HTML boilerplate. We'll create a HTML boilerplate. All right. So we have a very simple HTML boilerplate. So I'll just call this CSS course. All right. So okay. So now this is a CSS course. All right. So let me show you what I want to show us is the CSS syntax. Okay. So let's talk about the CSS syntax. Now we have three types of CSS. In the inline CSS, we have a different syntax apart from the internal and the external CSS. So now let me show you the syntax for the inline CSS. What the first thing you are going to do is to write the attribute called style. You write the attribute style in your HTML tag. Then the attribute has some properties. As you can see from my VS Code, it has already highlighted some properties that we need to use in our CSS. So now let's call this the color. Let's use the color property. I will say that the color of this text, want the color of this text to be what? Green. You can call it anything. Let's call it green. So now we'll quickly start. Let's go to Open Server and start this. Let's start our website. So now our website has just started on our browser. Look at it. This is a CSS course. You can see that the color of the text is green. I think that green is not visible enough. What I'm going to do is to change the color to red so that it will be very visible where we can easily see it. Okay. So now look at it. We have just changed the color of the text to red. So what I'm just showing you is the syntax. This is the syntax for inline CSS. Okay. And the next thing I'm going to do is to show us. So we have just simply defined what the inline CSS means. This is actually the inline CSS. Now let's talk about the internal CSS, and I will also show us the syntax for internal CSS. Let's talk about the internal CSS. How do you start writing your internal CSS? You quickly come here. When you come to the head tag, inside the head tag, you create a tag, a HTML tag called style, and close it. Look at it. Look at it. So now let's write another HTML. Let's write another HTML h4 again. Let's remove this internal CSS. Let's remove it, and let's call this let's change the text of this. This is an inline. This is an internal CSS chapter, right? So now we have just started this. If you go to our browser again, you'll see that the color of the text is black. All right. So now how do you change the color of this text using the inline internal CSS? So what you're going to do is, first of all, you will take what we call the selector. You call the selector, which is h4. But in this case, let's not use h4. Let's use a class attribute. We can call this class, let's say internal CSS. It must be in the same line. No spacing when you are naming your class. If you want it to be one, or unless it will be a different class names. So now let's choose this. Remember that we use dots in our, if you want to select our class attribute. So now we have just selected the HTML tag that has the internal CSS attribute as its class. So now let's say the color. We want the color to be what? Let's say the color to be blue. Now we have just chosen the color of this text to be blue. Let's go to our browser and see our rest. So you can see now that the color of this text has changed to blue. So what I'm trying to define here is the syntax, how to select your CSS HTML that you want to style. Okay, this is a p tag for our CSS course. Now we have just written this CSS course, and what you are going to do now is you select p, you select p and say the color. You set the color to be what? Let's say orange, or let's look for orange. This is like a coral. We want the color to be coral, right? The color of that p to be coral. Look at it, the color is green. But what it means in this case is that every p tag in this HTML file will have this color of coral. Okay, so it's not really a good way to select a HTML tag. You need to use either ID or class, or in such a case you make sure that you have only one p tag. That's your target. Your target you want to start is just that one. But if you have other numerous p tags, it's going to affect them. So now the next thing is, let's talk about what is called the selectors in CSS. What is this selectors? What is this selectors? Now, okay, now let's talk about the external CSS. If you check here already, we have already created a file in our folder already called style.css. So we have already created the file. What you are going to do now, if you write a CSS, this is a file where you write all your CSS. Okay, this is file. This is where you're going to write all your CSS. There's another thing I want to show us first before we start coding. How to bring in this external CSS to your normal to your HTML file. How do you bring it in this external CSS? So the step to bring in this external CSS into your HTML is to go into the head tag again. When you go into the head tag again, I think we should remove this. Let's remove this. I want us to focus on the external. So what you're going to do, you write a tag called the link. Look at this link tag is a self-closing tag. It doesn't require a closing tag. It's just itself. It has some attributes. The first attribute is the relationship attribute. It has the value of star sheets. Okay, so the next one is the href. The href is what links that your external CSS. Look at this external CSS, this file that we have created here. The way to link it to the HTML so that it will have effect to this HTML file is to use the href. You will now call the href attribute and then pass in this name style. Look at it, it's already there. Look at style.css. So now if you call, let me show you now. This is our p tag. If you come here and write p, if you select that p and say color to orange, you see that it will have that orange color because we have look at it. It has changed to orange. Let's reload again and say it has changed to that orange color. If you change it again to let's say something like blue, this is what is called RGB color. I will still define it. I will talk about it. You see that the color has just changed to blue. Okay, so now if you come again, so now let's talk about what we call the CSS selectors. What are these CSS selectors? CSS selectors is the way we access our HTML tags that we want to design, that want to give a color, that want to design with our CSS. Okay, so now how do we do it? Assuming you have a p tag and you are very sure maybe you have only one p tag that you want to style, just like what we did now. You just type the p. It must be I think is the best way to use the lowercase. Then look at this. So this first one, undo. Let me show you. We have the parts of the selector. The first one, which you want, that is the way you access the HTML is called the selector. All right, that's called the selector. This p here is the selector. Okay, then inside it we'll have, inside this curly braces, this curly braces is called the declaration. Inside the curly braces we'll have the property and the value. All right, so what is this property? Assuming you say color, you want the color of this, that's p, that p is a text. You want the color. What is it? It means that you want the color of that p tag to be, let's say green. So now the color here is the property, and the green you are seeing here, this green is the value. All right, this green you are seeing here is the value of the color of that p tag. Okay, so this is what the CSS selector means. Okay, so you can as well use, we have other types of selector. This is just the simple selector. You can as well use the ID of, let's say my ID and style whatever I want to style, or you can use any class name. Let's say use dot. Remember, when you want to style your class, remember when you want to style a class attribute, you use the dot. When you want to style the ID attribute, you use the hashtag. Okay, so now you simply say my class tag or something, whatever you call it. There's something we'll call BEM as well, how to name your CSS attribute, and I will also talk about it in our future class. So now this is just what the CSS selector means. This is the selector. This is the declaration here. So inside the declaration here, you can just say, okay, let's say you want to give it a padding. You just write a padding. The padding here is what? That's the property. You can call let's say 30 pixel. This is the value. All right, so let's clean up this now. So let's talk about what we call the colors. Let's write in another tag. Let's just write another tag. Let's use a p tag. This is color CSS what tutorial. You are just trying to write a normal CSS. I can use a lorem ipsum and just type something. Okay, lorem ipsum is just a way we write a lot of text in programming so that you don't need to keep typing. It's just a normal text. So now look at this text. Now if you want to give a color of this, we are talking about the CSS color. If you want to give a color of this text, how do you do it? Now we have already defined our external CSS. We are actually using our external CSS for all our CSS because it's very advisable to use your external CSS because it makes your code more readable and maintainable. But if you use the internal inline CSS, it will make your code, your HTML to be so messy, and as well the internal CSS will not also give you enough space to write your CSS. So it is very much advisable to use the external CSS to write your CSS. You just have to make sure that you are linking your CSS very well, like the way we have it here. Look at the way we have it in this place, this line, line 7. Okay, so now what you are going to do now is let's start styling this. We'll now say let's style this p tag. I want to show us what the color of, I've already talked about it, but let's just talk about it again. Now we want the color of this to be blue. Let me just show you something. If you come here, you see that all the p tag we have in our HTML, their color now is blue, right? Because we choose blue when we choose the selector to be p, it means that all the p tags in this particular HTML file is going to be what? Blue. So that is why it's very much advisable you use your class or your ID, or you just have to make sure that your p tag is a particular target that you want to use. Maybe it's 1 or something, or you are very sure you want to make all of them to be that color. So now let's give this a class attribute. Let's say p tag. So now you go to our p tag, you call it, remember you use dot for our class p tag. Now look at it, you want the color. We have already talked about the color. You just have to give it the color again. Let's say the color to be brown. Let's make the color to be brown. I want you to see a difference now. You see that the color of this one will change to brown. Look at it. That particular one that we use the ID for, that particular tag has changed to brown, while the other one remains to be blue. Okay, so let's also take off this code. All right. So now let's talk about the CSS comment. Let's talk about the CSS comment. How do you comment your CSS code? You just have to, like, let me first show you the shortcut. Just do Ctrl// you comment your CSS code. When you comment your CSS code, you get, so what it means that code is not going to affect the HTML tag again. It's just like you have just erased it. It's no longer there, but the text is just there. That's one beautiful thing with commenting. So now let's also copy this and paste again in other places. So if you want to comment manually, how do you remember this one is Ctrl//. That is the shortcut to comment it. If you want to comment manually, you have to use the /, then put your asterisk and write you make sure you close it so that it will not continue like that. So you see that we have already made a comment. You see, if I save it now, the CSS property has disappeared from that particular tag. So now let's talk about the CSS background. Let's talk about the background. Now we have selected this p tag, okay, and it has some text in it. Let's talk about the background. So this is also dot p tag. Please use, sorry, okay. This is the p tag, okay. So now let's talk about the background color. This is background color. let's say the background color to be blue violet. Okay, we have given it the color of blue violet for the background color of that particular p tag that we have selected. You see now that we have changed the background color to that blue violet. You see it, look at it, look at the color. Okay, this is how to, you can also put the background image. You can put if you can even use a video for the background image as well. Okay, but because of time, we may not really have chance to do all of that. And I promise to do all of that in our upcoming future videos. Okay, so now I will quickly show you again. Let's talk about the CSS borders. And again, you can also change this color of the background to anything you want. You can change the color to anything you want. Look at it, you are changing it to something like green. Look at the background color. So remember, we use the background color to change, or you can as well use the other property called the background as well. Okay, but to be more specific, I'm going to use the background color. Okay, so now let's talk about the what we call the box model in CSS. What is this box model? Let's talk about the box model. The box model is just like a property that surrounds a HTML content. Okay, let's write another div. Let's just write another div, and we'll call it the CSS model. Let's put a p tag inside it. We can call this, let's give it a class of CSS model. All right, so now let's just write some this is a model, this is a box model class in our CSS series. Okay, so now I've just given this a simple tag. If look at it, I'll have this here. So now let's start styling this HTML tag that has the class of CSS model. Okay, what we want to talk about is the CSS model. So this CSS model consists of the CSS padding, the CSS it consists of the CSS content, the CSS padding, the CSS border, and the CSS margin. Okay, so now let's quickly give a background. Let's quickly give a background color to that CSS. Let's give it the background color. Let's give it a background color of let's say gray, so that it will be easier to see. What is background color of gray? What's this shit? It's not showing. What happened? Let's refresh and be sure. Okay, now you see it has this color or background color. It has the background color of this gray. Okay, so now let's start talking about what is the padding and the border and the margin. Okay, so now let's give this a border. Let me show you what border means. This is a border. If let's give it a 40 pixel, but I want it to be very visible where you will be able to see it clearly. Okay, so let's give it a border. Did you see what happened here? It has expanded that inside it has created a space inside between that border and the content. You see that space down there. You see, look at it. You see there's a space now. Okay, this is what the border does. You can as well talk about the border. We'll have different properties in the border. We'll have the border, border top. If you talk about border top, let me cancel this again. Let me comment that particular one. Okay, if you talk about the border top, okay, you will see we'll have, let's call it 60 pixels. I want it to be very large so that you'll be able to see it. Okay, so look at it. The border only applied at the top. We'll have the padding border. We'll have also the same way we have for the border top, border bottom, border left, and the border right. Okay, if you do it the same, let's use the right border right now. You see what happened? Say let's say 10 pixel, 20 pixel, 5 pixel, and the let's say 15 pixel. Okay, what this means is this is the top, this is the right, this is the left, Now, what this means is this is the top, this is the right, this is the bottom, and this is the left. It goes like clockwise. It's go clockwise round. So okay. So now let me quickly show you the border left. Is border left, let's call it 90 pixels. I just want it to be large enough where you'll be able to see what is going on. Look at it, it's giving it a pattern there. Okay. So now if you look at this again, if we change this to right, you will not be able to see it clear because we have enough space down here. We have enough space within this area, so you'll not be able to see it. Okay, so now what this means, let me show you again what we just did there, this shortcut. You see that this pattern are different inside. You see that the top is bigger than the left side, likewise the bottom side. So that's what just happened here. Okay, so now let's talk about the border. Let me remove this padding, or can just quickly give it a single border of 10 pixels so that it will make our listen to bigger. So now let's give it a border. What is this border? Let's give it a border of I want this to be large enough so that you see 10 pixels solid what red. Okay, this is a beginner's course, so I just want it to be. So now if you look at this place now, you see that there's a kind of border that surrounds our content. You see there's a border here that has that 10 pixels solid there. Let's reduce the size of the border. Let's just reduce the size of the border. This is 5. You put this 5 here, you see that it has reduced. So this red color here is the border. What that border means is like, as the way the name implies, is covering that content. Okay, you can as well change the color of the border. We have different types of border. We have the dotted. Okay, you can as well change this solid to dotted. We have different stars. Look at it, it's dotted now. Okay, we have different properties. We have different ones you can choose. You can make more research and use them. Okay, so because of time, we may not really go into most of those parts. So now let's talk about the margin. So we can just leave this. Let's talk about the margin. Let's talk about the CSS margin. So let's just give it 40 pixel. I want it to be large enough. Okay. So you see now that the margin is at the outer space, aside from the border, is shifting. Look at it. We have enough space here between the last tag and this one. Look at it. We have enough space. This is what the margin is doing. Okay, this is just a complete border box. Look at it. Okay, if you make more research, you still find more of it. So now let's just quickly remove all of this, or let's comment it. I think let's comment it. I want us to talk about a different thing. Okay, let's talk about what you call. Sorry, I want to comment this. Okay. So I want us to talk about the height and the width in CSS. Let me give this. Let me just going on. Let me comment. I want to comment this again. Oh, my mouse is disappointing. So let me talk about the height and the width. Okay. So now before that, let me show you what it looks like again so that we'll be sure what you're doing. So now look at it. It has gone back to the normal default style. Okay, so now let me give you a quick example of the height and the width. Assuming you want to give this first of all, we have to give it a background color so that we will see where the height is showing. Let's give it a background color of brown again. Okay, something is means. Okay, let's remove the height. Let's first of all give it a background color. Let's give it a background color of blue violet. All right, so now we have the background color. So now let's start talking about the height. You can easily give it height so that we'll be able to see, because if it's white, we'll not be able to detect the height that we are giving to it. So let's first give it, let's say 200 pixel. I'll teach us what pixel are. You see now we have given that particular p tag a height, and this height will remain like this. There's what we call the max height we have the max height as well. Likewise, the width, we have the max width and the minimum width. We also have the max width. We also have the mean height, max height. Okay, so we'll talk about all of that in the future as we continue. So now we have just given this a height. Look at it. This is the height of the CSS. This is the height of that tag now. Okay. So now let's just look at this. Let's give it a width as well. So let's talk about the width. So we'll just give it a width of 400 pixel. You see what happened? We have just decreased the width of that tag and the height as well. So you can see now that we have just talked about the width and the height. Okay, so now let's remove this. These are just like the basics of our CSS. In our future courses, we'll be styling a full HTML, a full website with our CSS. But I just want you to grasp this knowledge of the basics, the foundation, because without this, you will not be able to style your CSS. So next topic is fonts. Let's talk about the font size. Let me just remove this. Let's talk about the font size. What do we do with the font size? This is the font size here. Let's call it with a 60. It's too large. So you can see that with the font, we can increase the size of our HTML text. You see, we have just increased the size. So by default, the size of every HTML text is 16 pixel by default. So we have just increased this to 16. So you can see that the thing has just increased. Okay, so now let's let's also talk about, you can as well use the bold. There's some you can as well use the bold. You can use font size. Let me remove this again. You can call font size, you can call the bold. Sorry guys, let me remove this. Gosh. Let's go here again. So now let's talk about the display property. So this, by default, this p tag, like the way we mentioned in our HTML course, this p tag is a block element by default. We have some block elements: the p tag, the div, the section, the article, the main. All of these are the p tag. The header tag, the h1, h2, h3 are all block elements. Then we have the span tag, we have the small, the span. These are the inline element, the input, image, the label. These are some of the inline elements. Okay, you can as well make more research and find out more of the inline elements. So now let's talk about this display property. We have the block. By default, this is block already. Okay, this is block already, so nothing will happen to it. It's block already. So if we give it inline, let me show you something. If we give it a property of inline, you remember as a block element is going to take the full width. So let me just give it a background color. Let's give it a background color again. Let's change this. Let's let's just write it fresh. This is common. If you give it this background color, you will see now that it has just taken only that anywhere the text can contain. It's not taking the full width right now. If I write let me write another HTML that follows it. It will see that. Let me just copy this and paste again. Let me just copy this and paste it down there. You will see that it will continue in the same line, but by default, it's a block element. It's not supposed to continue. But since we have changed the property, the display property to inline through our CSS, you cannot use it as an inline element. Okay, so let me just remove that property again. If I come here again and comment this, if I comment this, you will see that it has gone into two lines. It has taken a full width. It has come back to its normal default property that is block. Okay, so by default, the p tag is a block element. The hashtags, that is the h1, h2, are all block elements. The div are the block element. Okay, So let's quickly look at the way to now let's talk about and I'll call this this is flex. Let's call it the flex. Okay, flex one, flex two. There's a lot of things you can do with flex. Okay, let's just call them. We'll style this and give it a flex. Okay, so now the way I'm giving it flex now, look at it. It has the properties of. I've just given the class name flex. We have not styled it yet. Okay, so now let's also change the we don't need this color. Let's just let's call it flex. Okay, let's just call it flex. So this is CSS flex, and the main that's the parent that who two of them are is called the flex. Okay, so now let's tie this flex. We'll just do dot flex. Okay, oh sorry guys. So I'll just do now. If you go to our browser, you see that the two of them are in a new line. Okay, they are taking the full way. So let's make it to be in the same line using the display property of flex. So let's just call it flex. If you call it flex now, you will see that they have entered in the same line. This is another way also to change the CSS to be in the same line, but flex is a full course of its own in CSS. It's really a full course. It has a lot of properties, a lot of functions to talk about. So it's a full course of its own, just like the grid as well. Okay, so now let's also look at what we call positioning. There's what we call positioning in HTML, in CSS. Okay, so now let's I want to show us what positioning means. If you come here, let's remove this and use it. Let's use this for the position example. If you make it position of relative, nothing will happen to it. Okay, nothing will really happen, but you can change the position. You can change the position by using the top left. Let's call the top 50 pixel. You will see that there is a space at the top because we have used the property position. There is a space. We have just given it a space. This is no margin. We are using the position property. There is a space now between this and this. We have just given it a top. At the top, we are saying push it down with 50 pixel. Okay, so now you can as well use what we have the absolute as well. Okay, so if you look at the absolute, if you want to make, okay, let's change this. We have the absolute, we have the fixed, we have the sticky. Okay, so I can tell you that even the position itself is a full course of it, so it has a lot of ways to it's a very important topic in CSS. So we'll have to dive deep into this position in our next course. I'm going to release another course next week. This will be about the positioning. Okay, so now we'll just quickly talk about the opacity, and that will be the end of our CSS crash course. Then we will now go into let's just give this let's give it a background again. Let's give it a background color of brown. I want us to talk about the opacity. So this already have a background color of brown now. Okay, so what does the opacity do? Let me just show you what opacity do. Let's give the opacity of 0.5 or 0.4. Are you seeing what happened? It's making that background to fade. It's making it to fade. You can hardly see that text. Look at that text. You can hardly see it. So it's just making that background to fade. If I put it to 0.1, you will see nothing. You almost see nothing. Look at it. Look at it. I just faded, and it's fading with those texts in it. But you can still use CSS also to bring up this color and fade only the background. That's what our opacity does. Okay, so for today's crash course. This is just a crash course, like a beginner's course to know the foundation of CSS. Okay, let's say this will be the end of our crash course for today. In our future course, we're going to start with the position videos. We are going to start with the flex, CSS flex, the CSS grid. We'll talk about the combinators more. Then we'll talk about the drop down, how to use the drop down. Then we'll go about the advanced CSS, where we'll talk about the 2D transform, the 3D transforms, and other in CSS. And as well, we'll talk about the media query. The media query is a very important topic in CSS. It's a course on its own. You cannot treat it. If I start treating it, it will take us hours. So what we do, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to map out different videos for each of these topics, because they are very important. You cannot just treat it like that. People understand. Well, I want a way that when you watch the video, you understand something. Okay, so the media query is actually, we call it the CSS responsiveness. It's actually a property or a technique that allows your website to fit on all device sizes, on different device sizes. When you are designing a website, you want to make your website to fit on the mobile phone. You want to make it look good on mobile phone, look good on the tab, and as well different sizes of the laptop. Okay, so we have different sizes in CSS. Okay, so we'll talk about position in our next course. After position, we'll talk about the flex. After flex, we'll talk about the grid. After grid, we'll talk about the responsiveness and the and as well we'll talk about uh, the 3D. That's the animation in CSS. Okay, so thank you guys for listening. Please make sure you subscribe so that you get updates in our upcoming videos. This is just the basic crash course. I need you to understand the basic. If you're a beginner, this is very good for you. If you are already in CSS, it's also cool for you to refresh. Okay, so just subscribe, guys. Hit the like button, subscribe, so that you get a notification when I release my new video next week. Okay, I'm glad to see you guys today. I'm hoping to see you all next week or in upcoming video. In our upcoming videos, please make sure you leave a comment